Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today, a serious one. Let's do it. What's something that one of your classmates did in high school that you thought at the time was funny, but realized later on that it was not funny? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Had a kid in my year who'd had a surgery that left a nerve bundle in his neck exposed. If pressed, it would paralyze him. From memory, it was spina bifida, and for some ungodly reason, he told everyone. Certain boys took great pleasure in going downstairs behind him and pressing it, which completely paralyzed him for a few seconds, and he'd fall like a brick, usually onto whoever was in front of him. So dangerous. There were a fair few teeth knocked out because of this, his and other people's. It happened so much that in his third year, the school installed an elevator, and you had to have a special key to use it. He got the only permanent issue key at that time. Kids are assholes. In the 6th grade, I had a friend who was a troublemaker and a class clown. I've always hated going to my math class because my teacher was a cranky old lady who'd yell at you for the smallest things. Me being an 11-year-old, I actually had the worst anxiety just knowing I could be the next person yelled at in front of the class. The one thing that helped me get through the year was that friend, because I knew he'd always make jokes and have me almost in tears because they were that funny. One day, when my teacher walked out to use the bathroom, that friend went over to her desk, picked up the mug she was drinking out of, and spat out the biggest loogie into it. We all saw it, and just waited for her to come back. 10 minutes later, as she was just normally teaching, she picked up her mug and chugged it down. Everybody just starts laughing and giggling, including me, but nobody said anything when she questioned it. It was horrible, but it wasn't about to be the kid who snitched. Later on during that school year, I guess we had a day where it didn't start the normal 7:30 a.m., but instead of 10:30 a.m., but I didn't know, so I showed up really early. A bunch of kids didn't get the memo, so we all just placed in the cafeteria until school actually started. Around 9-ish, my math teacher noticed I was sitting out in the cold and invited me into her class where it was warm. When I got there, she let me work on my missed homework and even let me eat breakfast in her class. She asked me about home life, school life, if we had any friends, etc. She made me feel welcome. She then told me about her life, about her only son and her husband, who passed away from cancer 20 years back. She was very sweet. This was like back in 2008, and I think she was like 70 years old. I don't even know if she's still alive after all these years, but I wish I could go back and stop my friend from doing what he did. A few messed up kids in my primary school lit a teacher's car on fire just because she gave one of them a failing grade on a midterm. It wasn't one of the mean teachers. She was mostly nice to students. Cops got involved, but don't think they got punished accordingly. I know one of them was in and out of juvie already, and they were all around 13 to 14 years old. One was even into Nazi shit. No, later on, those kids all got tangled up in dealing and robberies. They probably all went to jail at some point. It wasn't in high school, but we all found out in high school. A boy named Hendo, his last name is Henderson, so that was and is his nickname, was drunk and told people how his brother once S'd his D in the bath. Well, this apparently happened. I'm not sure if he did actually confess to this or not, so everyone used to sing, "Hendo loves the bath, Hendo loved the bath," and it was constantly chanted at him. He was popular, so he'd get annoyed, but nothing ever really happened. Super messed up, though. Had a classmate come in every so often with a bruise or small cut on her face or arm, but she was part of the punk scene, so I chalked it up to maybe hopping into mosh pits, although I had never heard her mention going to shows. At one point during our junior year of high school, she spoke to a few people, sitting close, myself included, about going through the emancipation process of separating from her parents and living with a friend. It was also around that time that I noticed the bruises weren't occurring anymore. It took me a full 5 years to figure this one out. It's been a full 18 years since the incident, and she's doing much better. This actually happened to me. A group of 3 kids that used to be my friends invited me to come hang out with them at the lake. I had been an outcast from the group because I wasn't cool enough or whatever, so I was eager to get together with them. When I got there, they had apparently stolen all of the school books out of my locker and thrown them all in the lake right in front of me. They laughed hysterically and just left without saying a word. The next day, when I went to confront them about it at school, one of them had collected a Ziploc bag full of all 3 of their clipped fingernails and toenails and threw them in my face. Some got in my mouth, some got in my eyes, and some got in my ear. I broke down crying and gagging. Nobody faced any consequences other than me because I pushed the kid away from me, and he fell into a teacher carrying coffee. I was suspended for 2 days and had to pay for all the books they had destroyed because I had no proof that they were the ones that did it. I didn't do well in school and had anger problems, so the teachers assumed that I was the one who did it and tried to blame the other kids. I had this teacher whose breath was horrible, like someone literally took a crap in her mouth. Horrible. Anyway, this one kid left a big bottle of mouthwash on her desk when she wasn't looking one day. The whole class was laughing. Then she turned around and saw it, and you could see her kind of die inside. She went on to tearfully explain to the class how she had some kind of intestinal issue that she had been suffering with, and that she realized her breath was bad. Then she excused herself from the class for the remainder of the period. Now, as a kid, I thought that was hilarious until she started to cry. And now she was able to continue teaching us monsters after that is not something I will ever understand. And if that had been my wife or mother, I would have encouraged her to quit. I'm having what was called the man or mouse test. Basically, guys would take one of those big pink erasers and start going to work on their arms, and the one who lasted the longest was the real man. Plenty of bloody and scabbed up arms around school. I'm not ashamed to say that I was a mouse because I never participated. There were plenty of other instances that ranged from questionable to outright dangerous. Bottle rockets being shot down the hallway, filling milk jugs with acetylene and lighting them up with a torch, damaging the brand new school bus with a shot put, etc. High school was basically a shit show. A girl I rode horses with when I was in high school and she was in middle school told me that she and her mom watched together so they could make fun of the actors. She said this as if it was perfectly normal. She was not kidding. I thought it was weird and funny at the time, but now as an adult I'm horrified. Unfortunately, the girl ended up getting pregnant as a sophomore in high school, and her mother was so proud of her and happy that she was going to be a hot young grandmother. I'm not sure what happened to the girl after high school, so hopefully things worked out for her. We had a very attractive male student teacher when we were in high school, and the degree to which some of the girls were flirting with him got out of control. This guy was hot and tall, with model looks and such, and what started with a bunch of girls openly gawking at him and agreeing he was sexy escalated. I remember feeling genuinely bad for this guy. He just wanted to teach. He seemed to really want to do a good job, but he ended up getting sexually harassed like crazy. In the end, I think he got transferred within the district to a middle school or something, and I remember the principal ranting and screaming about how inappropriate some of the girls had been. In the 5th grade, we had a random urinal and sink shitter. The kid would shit in the sinks and urinals in a couple of the boys' bathrooms for a few weeks. It got so bad that the staff or teachers had to take kids in groups at the pre-designated times to go use the bathrooms while they waited outside. The kid was in my class and got caught because he was in my class and decided to shit in a urinal while his group was setting. He laughed hysterically the whole time and thought we would all think it was funny. I mean, we did think it was funny, but it was annoying we had to go in groups. He got suspended for a bit because of that, and then those incidents never happened again. I had a teacher, our class tutor, who was lovely, but she was tired of several classmates acting like little shits. One day during our home tutor class with her, several of them just kept messing about, picking on her and full-on blanking her when she spoke to them, acting as if she wasn't there. They found it hilarious. I and my friends were quite close with her, so we stayed after that class and asked her if she was okay. She looked at us and just started crying, saying how she's so tired of it and how they make her not enjoy teaching anymore. And she'd been teaching for over 20 years. The next day we actually told the class about it, and their faces dropped. I think for once they realized how far they pushed her. I felt so bad for her. I was kind of a mischievous kid, never a bully or did anything intentionally to fight with people, but did have some differences of opinions with teachers and, like that. But otherwise, general mischief. These stories, some of them are heartfelt and some of them are cruel. The last story today, I'm apologizing in advance when you get there. Like, I was pretty choked up. So thanks for being here, and see you guys soon. When I was a junior in high school, I broke my thumb and was given a flesh-colored plastic cast that fit over the thumb. Unfortunately, it really looked phallic. It was a joke with my friends for a while, dick hands, because it could be easily removed. One of my friends asked to see it and then shoved the cast down his pants and through his front zipper. And I swear to God, he flashed one of the lunch ladies with it. She literally screamed and ran back into the lunchroom, and within about 10 seconds, 4 male teachers came tearing out of the lunchroom and violently grabbed my friend and dragged him to the principal's office while screaming, "What the wrong with you?" To be honest, we all laughed in the holy shit did that just happen kind of way. About 15 minutes later, I got called into the principal's office essentially to corroborate this kid's story that it wasn't his real penis, but this stupid plastic cast I had on my thumb. My friend got expelled, and they were going to suspend me until I told the principal something like, "Did I think that this kid was going to shove my cast down his pants and flash a lunch lady? No. I thought he just wanted to see the damn thing." I got the "be careful who you're friends with" speech and let go. I'm pretty sure the lunch lady quit. Just a quick edit. A lot of people are saying that the kid shouldn't be expelled. I'll just say this. 17-year-old boys should not be whipping their dicks out at old ladies, regardless of whether the dicks are fake or not. A kid announced to all the other students that a particular teacher had titty cancer, saying it in a funny and mocking tone, and everyone laughed and laughed because the kid said titty, and they regarded it as funny kid at school. We only realized it was bad when the teacher heard it and broke down crying. We didn't realize we were making fun of her dying. I still carry secondhand guilt about that one. Edit to clarify, since some of you can't handle my use of second-hand guilt, I didn't join in with the other students because I thought it was wrong to make fun of someone, but I was also stupid and didn't connect their making fun of her to her potential demise, so I didn't stand up to the other students. I have second-hand guilt because I wish I had been more emotionally mature to understand what was happening and emotionally fortified to stand up for that teacher. We had a teacher in middle school that served in a war. I can't remember which war, but he had some combat, and it affected him. Some of our more asshole classmates thought it was hilarious to bring snaps to school, like the ones you get on the 4th of July that look like fat sperm, and you throw down on the ground and they make snapping sounds. Every time that poor man turned around, they would start throwing those snaps, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes he would go nearly full-blown flashback and hide, nearly crying under his desk from enemy fire. Some of our classmates, including the ones who did it, thought it was hilarious, and no one would stand up to them because those kids were in real white trash, country bumpkin sort of terrors that would seriously hurt you if you crossed them. The principal didn't really do anything about it other than urging the teacher to retire. Oof, it was painful to watch. Nutshots. I've been punched, poked, slapped, and smacked with a book there. I've dished out my fair share as well. It went on for a good 2 years before the trend died down. Bonus story. It need not be mentioned that I was a real asshole in this situation. A friend and I were messing around on the seesaw. He stood akimbo with his legs on either side of seesaw connecting rod. The idiot that I was, I tried to move the seesaw quickly to hit him. He anticipated the move and stopped it with his hands, except, unknown to us, another friend saw what was happening, and he pounced on my side of the seesaw, and the connecting rod hit the other friend in the nether. Luckily, he was not injured. That was probably the most brutal nutshot I was involved in. I had a guy friend in school who would always make sexual jokes, the kind of guy who could make anything sound dirty and gross. One time I was eating a muffin during lunch, and he goes, "I can't tell if you're enjoying that muffin or having an orgasm. It looks a lot like you're having an orgasm." The response from us girls would always be a haphazard, "Ew, Jason, that's gross." and then we'd roll our eyes and move on because that's just Jason. Years later, I got a message from him totally out of the blue. I hadn't seen him in years. And he'd sent me a photo that had come up on Facebook of me and his 21st. It was a typical embarrassing photo of me mid-conversation looking really weird. I thought he'd sent it to me just as a "remember this silly photo of you" thing. But once again, he made a gross comment about how it looks like I'm enjoying myself a little too much, and that I'm doing something a lot dirtier than what I had said I was. Getting this message from him now as someone in their late 20s just made me feel really gross and uncomfortable. It really made me realize how much of a perv he actually is, and I told him it was gross, inappropriate comment to make to anyone and promptly blocked him. We had a math teacher who was Indian, and we'll call her Ms. K, who in hindsight was the sweetest woman ever. She had a thick accent and was being middle school jerks in backwoods of Pennsylvania. We mocked her incessantly. Well, she was out for a week, and we had a substitute teacher who was young and full of optimism. One day, totally uncoordinated, a student started crying during class. The sub asked why he was crying, and the student just shook his head and didn't answer. The sub asked again, and another classmate started crying and shook his head. Now the sub was getting alarmed and asked the class what was going on. Paraphrasing, a friend of mine answered, "We can't tell you or we'll get in trouble." Sub came over to him, knelt down, and said with total sincerity, "It's okay, you can tell me." Well, Ms. K stands on her desk and strips like a stripper and makes us tell her she's beautiful. Sub's eyes got huge, and she ran to grab the principal. The whole class starts a mix of crying to keep it going and laughing. Admittedly, it was hard to tease out which was which. The principal came in screaming at us. Police were called and had to question a few of us, and then Ms. K came back into the class following the week-long, mortified. Painful to remember. She was really a kind teacher and taught me a lot. When I graduated high school, I went back and apologized, and she laughed, saying we were one of the best classes she ever taught, behavior-wise. So when we were in high school, teachers had to get the attendance through the computer before the lesson started. They were doing this by clicking a shortcut on the desktop up. So a friend of mine changed the URL to NoBrainIDK. I don't know if you guys know, but back in the day it was a famous prank site. He also turned the speaker on to max volume and also turned on the projector, which projects the PC screen to a massive board. The teacher came and clicked the shortcut. The music started playing, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and the whole class was watching two old, fully naked gay men doing nasty things on the big screen. Also, the thing with that site was you couldn't press X to quit the video or browser. It would not ever let you quit. The teacher got furious while we all laughed and had to shut the computer after multiple failed attempts to close the video. Yeah, after that incident, our class lost the computer for a whole year. Went to a technical high school, so one week it's academics, the next week it's trade school, and so on. I had plumbing, and our plumbing teacher was an old Vietnam vet who deserves major props once we found his records and what he did. Anyway, he sustained a shrapnel wound and needed very strong medication for it. In 11th and 12th grade, he was gone for the majority of the school year, and an asshole kids, we broke into his desk and found a morphine patch. Obviously, we thought this would be a fine time to let someone wear it. We, as not even fully functioning adults, thought it was fine to let another person wear a morphine patch designed for someone much heavier with a higher resistance to it. We finally realized that the enormity of our mess-up when someone asked the kid how he felt, and he said he felt his heartbeat slowing down. It was a collective moment as everyone rushed forward to remove the patch. He lived, and our sub, who was an English teacher and not a plumbing teacher, had no clue it ever happened. We were not a smart group. My teacher went to Vietnam, volunteered for a second tour, and carried his wounded friend to a helicopter while under enemy fire when he got wounded. One of my high school buddies plugged into a tiny USB wireless mouse in our Drive's Edu class computer. Whenever the teacher would open up any software to share on the smartboard, my buddy would close the application. The teacher was so confused for a solid month. He was older, probably in his late 50s. The teacher just kept blowing up and trying to call IT. But the IT department wasn't there past 4 p.m. Our class was at 6 p.m. Finally, one day, one of the honors kids in our grade goes, "Can you please stop messing with him? I actually want to learn." Everyone laughed as we basically were learning to not have road rage, how to obey traffic signs, and how to drive safely. So much racism. Our water polo team was banned from playing the Jewish school in our city because one dickhead drew swastikas all over himself in the change room before the game and walked out doing a Nazi salute. That guy and his group of friends would regularly drop our country's version of the N-bomb too. They were a small group from a specific culture and were very proud of our country's racist past and that part of our country's culture. They would regularly bully anyone from any other culture or race. The ringleader swastika guy always got a pass because he was a good kid from a bad home and our head teacher happened to be from the same culture. We literally used to have group fights between the 4 main cultures and races at our school. There were even allegiances like PG-16 prison gang war with the occasional knife or spade to spice it up. Hell, I used to say "thank you, come again" when my Indian friend had to stand up in front of the class and present. I didn't even know where the reference came from. I just heard other people say it. He was my friend, but looking back, he was probably just too shy to tell us to stop. The list goes on and on. That's just the first that comes to mind. So much racism. When I was a junior in high school, there was a kid that was a bully. Kids weren't too smart, was overweight, was on the poor side, etc. Basically a real-life Nelson from The Simpsons. One day at lunch, a group of kids were venting about the bully and another kid who was pretty tough just happened to be there. One kid jokingly asked the tough kid how much money would it take for him to punch the bully. He gives an answer, probably not really thinking it was going anywhere, but one thing leads to another, and kids start what amounts to be a grassroots verbal GoFundMe campaign, long before GoFundMe or even the internet was a thing, pitching in spare change. The goal is reached, but by this time the bully got wind of what was happening. Bully is the first one out of the lunchroom, with tough kid and probably 40 other kids chasing because they want to see it go down. The tough kid finally catches up to the bully just as the teacher steps into the hall and realizes something's going on. She tries to get between the two. The tough kid reaches over her and punches the bully just once, stops, and lets the teacher escort him to the office without objection. It was like one of those TV shows where someone ends up killing the perp out of revenge right in front of the cops and turns around to hold out their hands to be cuffed. Classic case of teenagers and hive minds. Looking back, the bully really wasn't even that bad. It was more the threat of being beaten up that him actually acting on it. And it probably was somewhat of a survival mechanism, given his personal situation. But when you're in junior high, you don't exactly have that wisdom and maturity, so the idea of finding a hired gun seemed like karma at the time. The friend classmate was me and another friend, and we pulled a prank on our friend for April Fool's Day. This is one of the worst things I've ever done to someone. Our friends, let's call her Jessica, had this older man in her neighborhood who was a family friend of her mom and stepdad. She had expressed to us in the past that this man was pretty creepy toward her and made her very uncomfortable. For example, she once found him in her room, picking through her dirty clothes, with the excuse that he was going to help her with her laundry. But, as it is often the case with high schoolers, she didn't feel like she had any actual proof and that her parents wouldn't believe her, so she just kept quiet about it until she told us in confidence as friends. On April Fool's, my junior year, my friend, let's call her Trish, and I wanted to pull a prank on Jessica because she had done something to annoy us recently. I don't even remember what it was, which speaks to how incredibly dumb this all was. We decided it would be hilarious to borrow someone else's phone, who she didn't have in her contacts, and text her pretending to be the creepy guy. During homeroom, we sent her some pretty effed up text, things like, "See you through your window tonight." Jessica understandably flipped out and had a panic attack when receiving the text. She went to the nurse and then the principal and told them everything. Her parents were called into the school, and it was only then that they had identified that the number wasn't the creepy guy's. And at that point, another mutual friend, who knew about what Trish and I did, spilled the beans. The most shameful part about this for me is that Trish and I still thought it was funny as hell, even after getting caught. And so did a lot of our mutual friends. Jessica, after recovering, laughed along with us, though in retrospect, she was clearly pissed off about the whole thing, which was confirmed in ensuing months as she slowly broke off her friendship with us. It wasn't until I went to college and started to really examine the kind of person I was in high school that I began to feel ashamed for it. Both Trish and I did offer Jessica a heartfelt apology, but at that point it was 2 years too late. Neither of us had spoken with her since. I guess, if there is any silver lining, her parents did listen to her about the guy, and he was no longer invited to their house and ostracized from the neighborhood in general. Not sure whatever happened with him long term though. Moral of the story, posing as a stranger, sexually harassing your friend over text is an absolutely shithead thing to do. I went to a very small private Christian school where the middle school and high school were in the same building. In the 8th grade, a girl in my class had sex with a super senior. They were discovered and both students were expelled. At the time, everyone blamed the girl for being a slut who got the best football player expelled. Not one person was mad at the guy, but everyone demonized her badly. Even the teachers contributed, saying how sad it was to lose such a good football player and that the girl caused him to stumble. Years later, I realized how absolutely fed up that was. This was not just some teenager messing around and getting caught. It was a 19-year-old man who arred a 13-year-old girl, and everyone blamed the girl. I cannot even imagine what it was like for that poor girl to be taken advantage of and then demonized by the entire school while her arrest was mourned over. Absolute trash. The situation is a huge reason why I have turned away from Christianity. I hope she's in a better place now. Pretty late comment, so I doubt anyone is going to read the story, well I am, but it had stuck with me my entire life, and I still think about it from time to time. We used to have a girl in my class, Jordan, who was severely overweight and autistic. Kids, being as ruthless as they are, always picked on her for being different. Instead of "your mama's so fat" jokes, they'd say "Jordan's so fat," among other cruel things. Whenever she'd get frustrated with them, she would hide her face in her shirt and cry. Well, the reason why she was overweight was because weight gain was a side effect of the medication she had to take for her autism. But most kids were too naive to care or understand. I was one of the few people who felt sorry for her and understood her because my brother had autism. We sat next to each other in 4th grade, and I would help her out with her schoolwork if she was confused, and would reassure her things would be okay in times of trouble. She then saw me as an ally, and would show me her drawings and good grades that she would get from time to time. I'd always give her compliments for both. After that year, I never saw her again. That summer between 4th and 5th grade, she came down with a rare disease and was hospitalized. To this day, I still don't know what exactly it was, but she ended up profusely bleeding into her stomach and puking it all out. She died within 5 hours from blood loss. Only about 20 kids from our entire class came to the funeral. It kind of pissed me off, but I assumed most of them who didn't come out did not feel welcome because they were ashamed of the way they treated her. When I got there and saw a few of my peers, the select few of us who accepted her for who she was, standing in front of her coffin, I joined them. It was an open casket. We all stood in silence. I guarantee none of us have forgotten that moment. 10 years old, seeing one of our peers lifeless. She looked lifeless. The mortician tried their best to use makeup, but her body was so pale that you couldn't hide it. It was a traumatizing sight. The whole thing was just so sad. A few weeks later, her mom had a garage sale to sell most of Jordan's stuff, partly because it pained her mom to see her things around the house, and partly because her mom needed the money after the hospital bills and the funeral. She worked as a dishwasher for the high school, so it wasn't the best paying job. When I got to talking with her mom, and she realized my name, she started bawling. She told me that Jordan talked about me all the time at home. I was her closest friend in our classroom that past year. She thanked me for being her friend and hugged me what felt like an eternity, and I didn't mind at all. She took me inside and let me look at Jordan's drawings in a sketchbook. Her mom didn't sell that for obvious reasons, and I stumbled upon a drawing she made of me and her sitting at our desks with big smiley faces. I couldn't fight back the tears. Her mom rubbed my shoulder and cried with me. We sat for a few hours, and her mom told me countless stories of her late daughter. I enjoyed listening to them. I got to know her better, And it made me believe, knowing those stories, that a part of her will live on in my memory. When I left, her mom let me keep the drawing she made of us. I still have it to this day. The whole thing was quite a traumatic experience for everyone in my grade, but I guess in the long run, it brought us together as a class. It opened our eyes to the blatant fact that we bullied a kid, and now she's dead. After that realization, we all had an unspoken understanding that it was wrong and we'd never do it again. All the way up to graduation, we never had a single fight within my class. Everyone was just so nice to each other. Even though we had our cliques, any one of us could sit down at anybody's table during lunch, and we'd let them jump in the conversation. Rest her innocent, beautiful soul. Her untimely death inadvertently brought peace and understanding to our entire class.